Emberborn, a medieval fantasy audiobook of love, war, and destiny. Chapter 1: The Storm Before the War. The wind howled through the silver pines of House Vailbrin, whispering secrets to the stone walls of the ancestral keep. It was the kind of wind that carried omens, of blood, of fire, of kingdoms undone. Alenia Vailbrin stood on the balcony of the eastern tower, her emerald gown fluttering like a banner of defiance. Her eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scanned the horizon where the sun bled into the clouds. War was coming. She could feel it in her bones, in the way the servants whispered, in the way her father's knights sharpened their blades with grim silence. But Alenia didn't fear war. She feared being forgotten. Born to the noble bloodline of Vailbrin, Alenia had been raised on tales of glory and conquest. Her mother had died giving birth to her, a sacrifice for greatness, her father had once said, drunk on mead and grief. Alenia had grown up in the shadow of her father's expectations, her beauty both armor and weapon. She knew how to smile just enough to make men bend, how to cry just enough to make them break. And yet, she had never been able to bend one man. Sir Cerwyn of House Thorn. He was everything she was not, gentle, honorable, bound by duty. His eyes were the color of storm-washed steel, and when he looked at her, it was as if he saw the girl beneath the ambition. The girl who once danced barefoot in the moonlight. The girl who wanted to be loved, not possessed. But Cerwyn was promised to another. Lady Lysandra of House Aloan, soft-spoken, kind-hearted, and utterly adored by the court. Alenia hated her. Not for her goodness, but for the way Cerwyn's gaze softened around her. For the way he held her hand like it was sacred. Alenia had tried to forget him. She had flirted with knights, danced with lords, even kissed Prince Mayron under the stars. But none of them made her heart race the way Cerwyn did when he said her name like a prayer. Alenia. She turned at the sound of her name, her heart stuttering. It was not Cerwyn. It was her father, Lord Tharian Vailbrin, his face carved from stone and sorrow. The banners of House Draymore have been sighted, he said, voice like gravel. They ride for war. Alenia's breath caught. House Draymore, the ancient enemy, wielders of blood magic and ambition. Their king, Malrek, had declared war on the alliance of the Eastern Kingdoms. And Vailbrin stood at the heart of that alliance. Then let them come, she said, chin high. We will not fall. Her father studied her, something unreadable in his gaze. You speak like a queen. I speak like a Vailbrin. He nodded, pride and fear warring in his eyes. Then prepare yourself. The court gathers tonight. And you must choose your allegiance. Alenia knew what he meant. Marriage. Alliance. Survival. She would be expected to bind herself to a powerful house, to secure Vailbrin's future. But her heart was not a chess piece. It was a wildfire. And it burned for a man who would never be hers. That night, the great hall of Vailbrin Keep shimmered with candlelight and tension. Lords and ladies filled the room, their silks whispering secrets, their smiles hiding daggers. Alenia moved among them like a queen without a crown, her presence commanding, her beauty dangerous. She danced with Prince Mayron again, his hands bold, his words bolder. You could be mine, he whispered, lips brushing her ear. Vailbrin needs strength. I offer it. She smiled, the kind of smile that made men dream and bleed. And what do you need, my prince? Your fire. She pulled away, heart aching. She didn't want a man who wanted her fire. She wanted one who could withstand it. And then she saw him. A stranger at the edge of the crowd, cloaked in black, eyes like obsidian. He watched her with a gaze that stripped her bare, that saw the ambition, the hunger, the vulnerability she buried beneath silk and steel. Kalendareth. The Shadow Knight. Rumors swirled around him like mist, exiled from the Order of the Flame, accused of forbidden sorcery, survivor of the Siege of Eld Hollow. He was danger wrapped in charm, mystery wrapped in scars. And he was watching her like she was the war he'd been waiting for. Alenia's breath caught. She didn't know his name yet. But she knew his eyes. They were the eyes of a man who would ruin her. Or save her. Chapter 2, Whispers of Fire and Steel. The first arrow flew at dawn. It sliced through the mist like a prophecy fulfilled, embedding itself in the wooden gates of Valebryn Keep. No trumpet sounded. No declaration was made. Only silence, and then the screams. House Draymore had come. Alenia stood in the war chamber, her fingers clenched around the edge of the map table. Her father barked orders to the captains, his voice hoarse with urgency. The eastern border had fallen. The village of Eldmere was ash and bone. And the Draymore sorcerers, those cursed wielders of blood and shadow, had unleashed something ancient. They've broken the accord, Lord Therion growled. They've summoned the hollow flame. Gasps rippled through the room. The hollow flame was forbidden, magic born of death, fed by sacrifice. It had not been seen since the War of the Shattered Crown, when it devoured entire cities. Alenia's heart thundered. She had read of it in the old tomes, hidden in the library's deepest vaults. Magic that could bend steel, unravel minds, and twist fate itself. And now it was loose. Outside, the courtyard was chaos. Knights mounted their steeds, squires ran with blades and armor, and the air reeked of fear. Alenia moved through it like a storm, her emerald cloak trailing behind her, her eyes locked on the horizon. She found Cerwyn near the stables, his armor gleaming, his sword strapped to his back. He turned as she approached, and for a moment, the war faded. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low. "I belong here," she replied. "This is my house. My war." He studied her, something aching in his gaze. "You don't have to prove anything." "I'm not proving," she whispered. "I'm surviving." Their eyes met, and the world held its breath. But then Lysandra appeared, her soft voice calling Cerwyn's name, her hand reaching for his. And just like that, the moment shattered. Alenia turned away, her heart a battlefield. That night, the fires burned high. The council gathered in the Hall of Ancients, where the walls were carved with the names of every Valebryn who had died in battle. Alenia stood beside her father, her presence demanded, her voice finally heard. "We must strike before they reach the Riverlands," she said. "If they claim the bridge at Duskmere, they'll cut off our supply lines." Lord Therion nodded. "Agreed. We ride at first light." And then the doors opened. Kalendareth entered like a shadow-given form. His cloak was soaked with rain, his boots stained with ash. He carried no banner, wore no sigil. But his presence was undeniable. "I bring word from the Western Front," he said, voice like velvet over steel. "House Aloan has fallen." The Draymore sorcerers used the hollow flame to breach their walls. There were no survivors. Gasps echoed. Lysandra collapsed to her knees, her house destroyed. Kerwin rushed to her side, his arms around her, his face carved with grief. Alenia watched, her heart a storm of fury and sorrow. Kaelin's eyes met hers. And in that moment, something passed between them, unspoken, electric, dangerous. Later, she found him in the library, standing before the ancient tomes. "You knew," she said. He turned slowly. "I suspected. Why didn't you warn us? Would you have listened?" She stepped closer, the air between them charged. "You speak like a man who's seen too much." "I've seen kingdoms burn," he said. "I've seen love twisted into weapons. I've seen magic do things no soul should witness. And yet you live." He smiled, a flicker of darkness in his gaze. "Living is easy. Surviving is the art." She studied him, her heart racing. "What are you?" He stepped closer, his voice a whisper. "A man who's lost everything. And a man who knows how to take it back." Their lips were inches apart. But then the bell tolled. War had come to Valebryn. Chapter 3: The Shadow Knight. The rain fell in sheets, drowning the world in silver and sorrow. Alenia stood beneath the archway of the ruined chapel, her cloak soaked through, her breath misting in the cold. The war had reached the Riverlands. Duskmere Bridge had held, for now, but the cost had been steep. 300 knights lost. 2 villages razed. And whispers of sorcery in the enemy ranks. She had ridden with the scouts, seen the carnage herself. Bodies twisted by unnatural fire. Trees blackened by spells older than memory. The hollow flame was no longer myth, it was a weapon. And it was winning. She turned as footsteps echoed behind her. Kaelin Dareth emerged from the mist, his armor dark as midnight, his eyes unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low. "You always say that," she replied. "And yet here I am." He stepped closer, the rain beating on his cloak. "You saw what they did." "I did." "And you still think this is a war of swords and banners?" She met his gaze, defiant. "It's a war of survival." Kaelin studied her, something flickering in his eyes. "Then you need to understand what you're surviving." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a shard of obsidian, etched with runes that pulsed faintly in the rain. "This was found in the ruins of Eldmere," he said. "It's a fragment of the hollow flame's core. It feeds on blood, on pain, on memory." Alenia's breath caught. "Memory?" Kaelin nodded. "It doesn't just burn. It consumes. It remembers. And it twists what it touches." She stared at the shard, her heart pounding. "Why show me this?" "Because you're not just a noble's daughter," he said. "You're something more. And they'll come for you." She stepped back, shaken. "What are you talking about?" Kaelin hesitated, then reached into his cloak and pulled out a scroll, ancient, sealed with the sigil of the Order of the Flame. "I wasn't exiled for treason," he said. "I was exiled for truth." He handed her the scroll. Alenia broke the seal with trembling fingers and unrolled the parchment. It was a prophecy, written in the old tongue, inked in blood. "The flame shall rise when the blood of Valebrand is awakened. She who bears the emerald fire shall choose the fate of kingdoms." Her knees buckled. Kaelin caught her. "You knew," she whispered. "I suspected," he said. "But now I'm certain." Alenia looked up at him, her heart a storm. "What does it mean?" "It means you're the key," he said. "To victory. To destruction. To everything." Later that night, in the war tent, Alenia sat alone, the scroll clutched in her hands. Her thoughts raced, memories of her mother's death, of the strange dreams that had haunted her since childhood, of the way fire sometimes danced on her fingertips when she was angry. She had always felt different. Now she knew why. She was the emerald fire. And the kingdoms would burn or rise by her choice. The tent flap opened. Kaelin entered, his face shadowed, his eyes burning. "You should rest," he said. "I can't." He sat beside her, silent. After a long moment, she spoke. "Why are you helping me?" Kaelin looked at her, and for the first time, his mask cracked. "Because I once loved someone who bore the fire," he said. "And I failed her." Alenia's breath caught. "What happened?" "She chose wrong," he whispered. "And the world paid the price." Their eyes met. And then, slowly, inevitably, their lips touched. It was not gentle. It was fire meeting fire. It was war and longing and desperation wrapped in one stolen moment. When they pulled apart, Alenia's voice trembled. "This changes nothing." Kaelin's gaze was steady. "It changes everything." Chapter 4, Ashes of the Old World. The sky over Valebrand burned crimson. Smoke curled into the heavens like morning veils, and the scent of ash clung to every breath. The war had breached the heartlands. House Aloan was gone. House Thorn was scattered. And Valebrand Keep, once a fortress of pride, now stood surrounded by fire and ruin. Alenia rode through the wreckage, her cloak torn, her hands bloodied. She had fought beside the knights at Duskmere, wielding blade and flame, her magic no longer a secret but a weapon. The emerald fire had awakened in her, wild, untamed, beautiful, and terrifying. She had saved lives. She had taken them, too. The villagers looked at her with awe and fear. Some whispered that she was chosen. Others called her cursed. But none dared speak against her, not after what she had done to the Draymore sorcerer who tried to claim her. She had burned him from the inside out. In the shattered great hall, Lord Therion lay on a bed of furs, his body broken, his spirit fading. A spear had pierced his side during the last skirmish, and the healers whispered that even magic could not save him. Alenia sat beside him, her fingers wrapped around his. "You must bleed now," he rasped. "Valebrand is yours." She shook her head, tears streaking her soot-stained cheeks. "I'm not ready." "You were born ready," he said. "You were born of fire." His grip tightened. Do not let them take this from you. Not the Draymore. Not the court. Not even him. Alenia's heart stuttered. Kaelin? Her father's eyes darkened. He walks with shadows. Be careful. And then he was gone. Alenia did not cry. She stood. And she swore vengeance. The court gathered days later in the ruins of the chapel, the stained glass shattered, the altar scorched. Lords and ladies from surviving houses came to pledge fealty, or to scheme. Alenia wore her mother's emerald circlet, her gown stitched with silver thread, her presence undeniable. She was no longer the girl who danced in moonlight. She was the Lady of Valebryn. Kaelin stood at the edge of the crowd, his cloak billowing, his eyes unreadable. He had fought beside her, saved her life more than once. But he had secrets. And she could feel them pressing against her like a blade to the spine. After the council, she found him in the crypts, staring at the tomb of the first Valebryn queen. You knew my father would die, she said. Kaelin didn't flinch. I knew the wound was mortal. You didn't try to save him. I couldn't. She stepped closer, fury in her veins. You always say that. You couldn't. You wouldn't. You didn't. He turned, his face carved with pain. I've lost too many. I couldn't lose you. Her breath caught. I don't need your protection, she whispered. No, he said. You need the truth. He handed her a second scroll, older, brittle, sealed with obsidian wax. It spoke of the Flameborn. Of a bloodline forged in ancient magic. Of a girl who would rise from ashes and choose the fate of the world. Alenia's name was written in the margins, in ink that shimmered green. She staggered back. This is prophecy. It's history, Kaelin said. And it's happening. That night, the castle walls trembled. Draymore forces had reached the outer villages. The hollow flame surged, and the sky turned black with sorcery. Alenia stood on the battlements, her sword in one hand, her fire in the other. She would not run. She would not beg. She would burn. Kaelin joined her, his blade drawn, his eyes fierce. Are you ready? He asked. No, she said. But I'll fight anyway. They stood side by side as the enemy came. And the old world turned to ash. Chapter 5, Chains of Pride. The throne room of Valebryn Keep had never felt so hollow. The tapestries were gone, burned or stolen. The stained glass shattered. The marble floor cracked beneath the weight of war. And yet, Alenia stood at its center, crowned in emerald and defiance, her voice commanding, her gaze unyielding. She had taken her father's seat. Not by tradition. By fire. The lords had protested. The court had whispered. But none dared challenge her, not after she summoned the emerald flame during the siege of Duskmere and turned the tide with a single word. Burn. Now, they bowed. But they did not love her. And Alenia did not care. Love was weakness. Survival was power. She spent her days rebuilding, strategizing, forging alliances, issuing decrees. She reopened the mines beneath the Frostspire Mountains, bartered with the merchant guilds of Alarin, and sent emissaries to the fractured remnants of House Thorn. She even summoned Lady Lysandra to court. The girl arrived cloaked in grief, her eyes hollow, her voice barely a whisper. Her house was gone. Her betrothed, Cerwyn, had vanished during the last skirmish, presumed dead or captured. Alenia offered her sanctuary, and Lysandra, broken and desperate, accepted. But Alenia's kindness was calculated. She needed Lysandra's name, her bloodline, her influence. And she needed to bury the girl who had once held Cerwyn's heart. Kaelin watched from the shadows. He had not left Valebryn since the siege. He had fought beside Alenia, bled for her, kissed her like a man drowning. But she had changed. She was colder now, sharper. He found her in the war chamber one night, surrounded by maps and scrolls, her fingers stained with ink and ash. "You're becoming what they fear," he said. She didn't look up. "Good." Kaelin stepped closer. "You're losing yourself." Alenia's laugh was bitter. "I never had the luxury of being found." He reached for her hand. "You don't have to do this alone." She pulled away. "I'm not alone. I have power." Kaelin's voice cracked. "And what will you do when it consumes you?" She turned, her eyes blazing. "Then I'll burn brighter." The court grew restless. Rumors spread, of Alenia's magic, of her ambition, of her manipulation of Lysandra. Some whispered that she had summoned spirits in the crypts. Others claimed she had made a pact with the hollow flame itself. Alenia ignored them. She had bigger plans. She sent envoys to House Viral, offering marriage to their youngest son in exchange for troops. She negotiated with the sorcerers of the Obsidian Circle, trading relics for spells. She even considered forging an alliance with the exiled warlord of the Eastern Wastes. Kaelin confronted her in the moonlit garden. "You're playing with fire," he said. "I am fire," she replied. He grabbed her arm, his voice desperate. "This isn't you." She looked at him, her heart aching. "You don't know me." "I do," he whispered. "I see the girl who danced in moonlight, who wanted love more than power." Alenia's voice trembled. "That girl died with my father." Kaelin kissed her. It was not passion. It was grief. And when he pulled away, she was crying. But she did not stop him when he walked into the night. Days later, news arrived. Cerwyn was alive. Captured by Draymore. Tortured. But alive. Alenia's heart shattered. She had buried him in her mind, replaced him with ambition, with Kaelin, with fire. But now he lived. And Lysandra wept with joy. Alenia did not. She felt only rage. Because Cerwyn had not come back for her. He had come back for Lysandra. And Alenia, Lady of Valebryn, bearer of the Emerald Flame, was alone. Chapter 6, The Sword and the Heart. The war paused, but only for breath. Valebryn Keep stood like a wounded beast, its walls patched, its people weary. The Draymore forces had retreated to regroup, and the court called it a victory. But Alenia knew better. This was the eye of the storm. And in the silence, the heart screamed. Kerwin returned under moonlight, escorted by a dozen knights and a healer from the Obsidian Circle. His body bore scars, burns from sorcery, lashes from chains, and a jagged wound across his ribs. But his eyes were unchanged. Still storm-washed steel. Still unreachable. Alenia watched from the balcony as Lysander ran to him, her sobs echoing through the courtyard. Kerwin held her like salvation, his lips brushing her hair, his hands trembling. Alenia turned away. She had burned for him once. Now she burned without him. Kaelin found her in the war chamber, her fingers clenched around a goblet of wine, her crown discarded on the table. "He's back," Kaelin said. "I know." Kaelin stepped closer. "And you're unraveling." Alenia laughed, bitter and broken. "I'm not unraveling. I'm evolving." Kaelin's voice was quiet. "Into what?" She looked at him, her eyes blazing. "Into someone who doesn't need love to survive." Kaelin reached for her hand. "But you do." She pulled away. "Don't." He stepped back, wounded. "You kissed me. I needed comfort. You needed truth." Alenia's voice cracked. "I needed to forget him." Kaelin's jaw tightened. "Then forget me too." He turned and left. And Alenia shattered. The next day, the court gathered for the binding ceremony, a ritual to honor Kerwin's survival and Lysander's loyalty. Alenia presided, her gown woven with emerald and silver, her face carved from ice. She watched as Kerwin pledged himself to Lysandra, his voice steady, his gaze soft. She watched as Lysander smiled through tears, her hand trembling in his. And she watched as her heart broke again. But she did not cry. She stood. And she smiled. Because pride was stronger than pain. That night, Kaelin returned. Not to her chambers. To the crypts. Alenia followed, her footsteps silent, her breath shallow. She found him kneeling before the tomb of the flame-born queen, his sword laid across his lap, his eyes closed. "I loved you," she said. Kaelin opened his eyes. "I still do." Alenia stepped closer. "Then why did you leave?" "Because you chose ambition." She knelt beside him. "I chose survival." Kaelin's voice trembled. "And now you're alone." Alenia's tears fell, silent and scorching. "I don't know how to be anything else." Kaelin touched her cheek. "Then let me show you." Their lips met again. This time, it was not fire. It was healing. It was hope. It was the sword laid down for the heart. Chapter 7, Bloodlines of Power. The vault beneath Valebryn Keep had not been opened in centuries. Its doors were carved from obsidian, sealed with runes that pulsed faintly in the dark. Only the blood of the Flameborn could break them. And Alenia's blood had begun to stir. She stood before the ancient gate, her palm pressed to the sigil, her heart pounding. Kaelin stood beside her, his sword drawn, his eyes wary. "This is where it begins," he said. "No," Alenia whispered. "This is where it ends." The gate groaned open. Inside, the air was thick with magic, old, wild, and waiting. The chamber was circular, its walls etched with the history of her bloodline. queens crowned in fire, kings consumed by it. Wars fought over prophecy. And at the center, a pedestal of crystal, glowing with emerald light. Alenia stepped forward. The pedestal responded. A scroll unfurled, floating in the air, its ink shimmering with power. She read, "Born of flame, forged in sorrow. She shall rise when kingdoms fall. Her heart shall choose the path, light or shadow, crown or ruin." Tears blurred her vision. Kaelin touched her shoulder. "You were never just a noble." "I was never just a girl," she said. The days that followed were a blur of revelation. Alenia studied the scrolls, the relics, the tomes hidden beneath Veilbrin. She learned of her ancestors, flame-born queens who could bend fire to their will, who ruled not with swords but with magic. She learned of the hollow flame, once a gift, now corrupted. And she learned of the prophecy. She was the last, the final bearer of the emerald fire. And her choice would shape the fate of the world. But choice was a blade. And it cut deep. Lysandra grew distant. She had seen the fire in Alenia's eyes, heard the whispers in the court. She feared her. And Cerwyn, though loyal to Lysandra, could not hide the way his gaze lingered on Alenia. Not with love. With sorrow. One night, Alenia found him in the chapel, staring at the shattered altar. "I saw you in the flames," he said. Alenia's breath caught. "What did you see?" "A girl I loved," he whispered. "And a queen I feared." She stepped closer. "You don't have to fear me." "I do," he said. "Because you'll choose power. And I'll lose you again." Alenia's voice trembled. "You never had me." Cerwyn's eyes darkened. "Then why does it still hurt?" Kaelin watched from the shadows. He had seen this before, love twisted by prophecy, hearts broken by destiny. He had loved a flameborn once. And she had chosen wrong. He would not let Alenia do the same. He found her in the vault, her hands glowing with fire, her eyes wild. "You're losing yourself," he said. "I'm finding myself," she replied. Kaelin stepped closer. "Then find me too." She looked at him, her heart aching. "I don't know how." Kaelin kissed her. It was not fire. It was truth. And Alenia wept. The court demanded answers. Rumors spread of Alenia's magic, of her bloodline, of the prophecy. Some called her savior. Others called her curse. The lords of House Viral withdrew their alliance. The Obsidian Circle sent warnings. And the Draymore King sent a message. Surrender the Flameborn. Or burn. Alenia stood before the court, her crown gleaming, her voice steady. "I will not surrender." The lords protested. Kaelin drew his sword. And Alenia summoned fire. The chamber blazed with emerald light. And the court fell silent. She was no longer a girl. She was no longer a noble. She was flameborn. Chapter 8: The Fall of Illusions. The emerald fire flickered. Not with power. With doubt. Alenia stood in the Hall of Ancients, the scrolls of prophecy scattered around her, her crown heavy with consequence. The court had fractured. House Viral had declared neutrality. The Obsidian Circle had withdrawn their mages. And whispers of rebellion stirred in the lower halls. She had built her throne on fire. But fire consumes. And now, it threatened to consume her. Lysandra approached her in the garden, her gown pale as moonlight, her eyes rimmed with sleepless grief. "You're losing them," she said. Alenia didn't look up. "They were never mine." "They were," Lysandra whispered. "Until you chose power over people." Alenia's voice was cold. "I chose survival." Lysandra stepped closer. "And what will you do when there's no one left to survive for?" Alenia turned, her eyes blazing. "I'll survive for myself." Lysandra's tears fell. "Then you've already lost." Kalen had grown distant. He no longer stood beside her in council. He no longer walked with her through the ruins. He trained alone, fought alone, and watched her with eyes that no longer burned, but bled. Alenia found him in the crypts, his sword laid across his knees, his hands trembling. "You're leaving," she said. Kalen didn't answer. "You promised," she whispered. "I promised to protect you," he said. "Not to watch you become what you swore you'd never be." Alenia's voice cracked. "I'm doing what I must." Kalen looked at her, his gaze hollow. "And I'm doing what I can." He stood. And he walked away. Alenia did not follow. She could not. The rebellion came at dusk. A faction of knights, led by Lord Edrin of House Morwen, stormed the lower halls, demanding Alenia's abdication. They claimed she had corrupted the throne with sorcery, that she had betrayed the old ways, that she was no longer fit to rule. Alenia stood before them, her cloak billowing, her fire pulsing. "I am Flameborn," she said. "I am prophecy." Lord Edrin raised his sword. "You are ruin." The battle was swift and bloody. Alenia fought like a tempest, her fire scorching steel, her blade singing through air. But the rebels were many, and her allies were few. Lysandra was wounded. Kerwin was captured. And Kalen returned. He rode through the gates like vengeance incarnate, his blade cleaving through rebels, his magic unleashed. He fought beside Alenia, shielded her, bled for her. And when the last rebel fell, he collapsed. Alenia caught him. His blood soaked her gown. His breath was shallow. "I came back," he whispered. Alenia's tears fell. "You shouldn't have." Kalen smiled. "I always do." And then he closed his eyes. The rebellion was crushed. But the cost was unbearable. Lysandra lay in the healer's wing, her body broken. Kerwin was freed, but his spirit fractured. And Kalen hovered between life and death, his fate bound to magic older than time. Alenia sat beside him, her fire dimmed, her crown discarded. She had won. But she had lost everything. She touched his hand, her voice trembling. "I chose wrong." Kalen's eyes fluttered open. "Then choose again." Chapter 9, The Last Battle. The sky split open. Lightning danced across the heavens, casting jagged shadows over the battlefield. The armies of Draymore had arrived, 1,000 strong, cloaked in ash and sorcery. Their banners bore the sigil of the hollow flame, and their war cries echoed like prophecy fulfilled. Valebryn stood ready. Alenia rode at the front, her armor forged from obsidian and silver, her sword pulsing with emerald fire. Her crown was gone, her title abandoned. She was no longer Lady of Valebryn. She was Flameborn. And she would not kneel. Kaelin stood beside her, his wounds bound, his eyes fierce. He had returned from the brink of death, not by healing, but by choice. The magic within him stirred, ancient and wild, a remnant of the order he once betrayed. "I'll fight with you," he said. Alenia nodded. "And if we fall?" Kaelin smiled. "Then we fall together." The battle began at dawn. Steel clashed. Magic erupted. The ground trembled beneath the weight of war. Alenia moved like a tempest, her fire carving through enemy ranks, her blade singing with vengeance. She saw Cerwyn fighting near the eastern ridge, his sword flashing, his face carved with fury. She saw Lysandra shielding the wounded, her hands glowing with borrowed magic, her voice steady. She saw Kaelin, always Kaelin, fighting like a man with nothing left to lose. And then she saw him. King Malrek of Draymore. He stood atop a hill of corpses, his cloak billowing, his eyes burning with hollow flame. He raised his staff, and the sky darkened. "You are the Flameborn," he called. "But you are not the only fire." Alenia stepped forward, her voice ringing. "You are corruption." "I am truth," Malrek said. "And truth burns." He unleashed the hollow flame. It surged across the battlefield, devouring light, twisting air, consuming magic. Knights screamed. Sorcerers fell. The world began to unravel. Alenia raised her hands. And the emerald fire answered. It collided with the hollow flame, a clash of destiny and destruction. The sky exploded. The earth cracked. And time itself seemed to pause. Alenia saw visions, queens crowned in fire, kings consumed by it, Kaelin's face twisted in grief, Cerwyn's eyes filled with sorrow, Lysandra's tears falling like rain. She saw herself. Alone. Powerful. Broken. And then she chose. She let go. Of pride. Of vengeance. Of legacy. She chose love. The emerald fire surged, not to destroy, but to heal. It wrapped around the hollow flame, suffocating its corruption, unraveling its magic. Malrek screamed, his body consumed by light. And then he was gone. The battlefield fell silent. The war was over. Alenia collapsed. Kaelin caught her. She opened her eyes, her voice a whisper. Did we win? Kaelin smiled. You chose right. She touched his face. I'm sorry. He kissed her forehead. I forgive you. Cerwyn and Lysandra survived. They returned to the Riverlands, rebuilding what was lost, healing what was broken. Cerwyn never spoke of Alenia again. But sometimes, when the wind howled, he looked to the east. And Lysandra held his hand. Alenia abdicated. She left Valebryn to the council, to the people, to the future. She rode into the ancient forests with Kaelin, seeking peace, seeking purpose, seeking herself. She was no longer Flameborn. She was Alenia. And that was enough. Chapter 10, Whispers in the Ruins. The forest was quiet. Not the silence of fear. The silence of peace. Alenia walked barefoot through the moss-covered glade, her cloak trailing behind her, her fingers brushing the bark of ancient trees. The war was over. The kingdoms were rebuilding. And she was learning how to breathe again. Kaelin walked beside her, his hand warm in hers, his sword sheathed, his magic dormant. They had left Valebryn behind, not in exile, but in choice. The keep belonged to the people now. The crown rested in a vault. And the emerald fire slept within her, no longer a weapon, but a memory. They had found a cottage nestled between the cliffs and the sea, where the wind sang through the stones and the stars burned brighter than prophecy. It was small. It was quiet. It was enough. Alenia spent her days tending the garden, reading the old tomes, writing letters to Lysandra and Cerwyn. The two had married in a quiet ceremony, choosing love over legacy. Cerwyn had never spoken of Alenia again. But his letters were kind. And Lysandra's were full of hope. Alenia smiled when she read them. She had let go. And in the letting go, she had found herself. Kaelin built a forge behind the cottage, crafting blades not for war, but for ceremony, for art, for remembrance. He rarely spoke of the order. But sometimes, when the wind howled, he would sit by the fire and whisper stories of the Flameborn who came before. Alenia would listen. And sometimes, she would cry. One evening, as the sun dipped below the cliffs, Alenia stood at the edge of the sea, her hair tangled in the breeze, her heart steady. She closed her eyes. And she whispered. To the girl who danced in moonlight. I remember you. She opened her eyes. Kaelin stood behind her, his smile soft. To the queen who chose love, he said, I thank you. Alenia turned. And she kissed him. Not with fire. With peace. The world moved on. Valebryn became a symbol, not of power, but of resilience. The Flameborn became legend. The hollow flame was buried beneath stone and spell. And the kingdoms learned to live without prophecy. But in the forest, in the cottage by the sea, Alenia lived. She was not queen. She was not warrior. She was not chosen. She was simply Alenia. And that was enough. Chapter 11, Echoes of the Flame. Years passed. The kingdoms healed slowly, like old wounds kissed by time. The war became legend, the hollow flame a cautionary tale whispered to children beneath starlit skies. Valebryn Keep was rebuilt, not as a fortress, but as a sanctuary. Its halls no longer echoed with ambition, but with learning, with peace. And the name Alenia Valebryn became myth. Some said she vanished into the forests, her fire extinguished by grief. Others claimed she ascended to the stars, her soul bound to prophecy. A few whispered that she still walked among them, cloaked in silence, watching the world she saved. But none truly knew. Except one. Kaelin Dareth sat beneath the ancient tree where they had first kissed, his hair streaked with silver, his eyes still fierce. He carved runes into wood, teaching the children of the village how to read the old tongue, how to listen to the wind, how to wield magic not with power, but with purpose. He spoke of Alenia often. Not as a queen. Not as a warrior. As a girl who chose love. And the children listened, wide-eyed, hearts open. One child, Elira, had fire in her veins. She was orphaned during the last skirmish of the border wars, found wandering the ruins of a forgotten village. Her eyes shimmered green. Her touch warmed stone. And when she cried, the wind wept with her. Kaelin took her in. He taught her the stories. He showed her the scrolls. And one day, she asked, was she real? Kaelin smiled. She was more than real. She was flame. Elira tilted her head. Will she come back? Kaelin looked to the horizon, where the sea met the sky. She never left. In the forest, in the cottage by the cliffs, a woman stood barefoot in the garden, her hair tangled in the breeze, her hands stained with soil and magic. She whispered to the wind. And the wind whispered back. Alenia Veilbrin had chosen peace. But her fire lived on. In stories. In hearts. In echoes. Chapter 12, The Air of Ash and Light. The wind shifted. Not with storm. With promise. Elira stood at the edge of the cliff, her cloak fluttering like wings, her eyes reflecting the sea. She was 16 now, tall, fierce, and quiet. The villagers called her the Ember Child, but Kaelin had named her something else. Hope. She had grown beneath the canopy of ancient trees, learned to read the stars, to speak to the wind, to coax flame from stone. She had never met Alenia. But she knew her. In every whispered story. In every scar Kaelin carried. In every dream that burned behind her eyes. One morning, Kaelin placed a scroll in her hands. It was sealed with emerald wax. Elira broke it with trembling fingers. Inside, the words shimmered. To the one who comes after. You are not me. You are not my fire. You are not my crown. You are your own light. But if the world forgets how to burn for love, remind it. Alenia. Elira wept. And the wind wept with her. The kingdom stirred again. Not with war. With unrest. The borderlands whispered of rising shadows. The hollow flame, though buried, was not gone. And the court of Veilbrin sent envoys to the forest, seeking the girl with emerald eyes. Kaelin stood at the gate, his sword across his back, his voice steady. She is not ready. Elira stepped forward. I am. She rode into Veilbrin not as a queen. As a question. The court watched her with awe and fear. She bore no crown, no title. Only a scroll. Only a name. Only a fire that pulsed beneath her skin. She stood before the council. I am not Alenia, she said. I am Elira. And I choose light. The world did not erupt. It exhaled. The hollow flame stirred, but did not rise. The kingdoms bent, but did not break. And Elira became legend. Not for war. For peace. Years later, in the cottage by the cliffs, Kaelin sat beneath the stars, his hair white, his eyes soft. Alira returned often. She brought stories. She brought laughter. She brought light. And sometimes, when the wind howled, she would whisper to the sea, to the queen who chose love, "I remember you." Chapter 13, Embers in the Wind. The stars blinked slowly over the forest, like ancient eyes watching the world finally at rest. Alina sat on the porch of the cottage, her fingers curled around a cup of herbal tea, her hair streaked with silver, her fire quiet. She had not summoned magic in years. Not because she couldn't. Because she didn't need to. Kalen slept inside, his breath steady, his dreams soft. The forge was cold tonight. The garden was overgrown. And the sea whispered lullabies to the cliffs. It was enough. Alira visited often. She brought stories from Valebryn, of new councils, new treaties, new beginnings. She had become a leader not by fire, but by listening. She wore no crown. She carried no sword. But when she spoke, the world leaned in. Alina watched her with quiet pride. "You're better than I was," she said one evening. Alira smiled. "I'm only what you made me." Alina shook her head. "I didn't make you. I just gave you space to grow." One morning, a child arrived at the cottage door. A boy with eyes like dusk and a voice like wind. He carried a broken blade and a question. "Can you teach me?" Alina looked at Kalen. Kalen looked at her. And they nodded. The cottage became a sanctuary. Not for warriors. For dreamers. Children came with stories, with scars, with songs. Alina taught them to read the stars. Kalen taught them to shape steel. And together, they taught them to choose love over legacy, peace over pride. The fire never returned. But the light never left. Years later, when Alina's breath grew shallow and her hands trembled, she sat beneath the ancient tree and whispered to the wind. "I was flame." The wind whispered back, "You were love." And when she closed her eyes, the stars blinked slowly. And the world remembered. And so the fire fades, but the story lives on. If Alina's journey stirred something in you, if you felt the weight of her choices, the ache of her love, the pulse of her magic, don't let it end here. Fire subscribe to stay close to the flame. Speech balloon, leave a comment and share what moment broke you, or healed you. Red heart like this audiobook if you believe love can still rise from ashes. Your voice keeps the legend alive. Your story might be the next to burn bright. Until the next tale, may your heart be fierce, your path be true, and your magic never fade.